Our next speaker, Gad, will take the stage in a minute. He is working on his own startup at the minute, but he used to work at WeWork and Melio. He has over 15 years of experience in product development, and he will also briefly mention a really interesting side project of his, which is Kaduregel Shefel. Gad, please take the stage.
Hello, hi everyone. So, nice to meet you all. So today we're going to talk about the story behind one of Melio's engineering groups. Melio is an Israeli fintech unicorn startup, and I'm going to talk about how we scaled from 1 engineer to 40 engineers in about 2 years. I'm not only going to share like practical tools, but we're also going to share how with the right vision, how with asking the right questions and mapping the right gaps between where we want to be and where we are currently, and how we can create tools for it, we can achieve all this. But first, usually when I come into a room, I introduce myself, I get to know the people, but I guess you're more than 10 people, so believe me, it's more embarrassing for me, so let's do something like this. On the count of 3, just say your name out loud, okay? Believe me, I'll catch a few names, and we can move on. Believe me, it's more embarrassing for me, so 1, 2, 3. Well, I didn't catch even one name. I can just assume that one of you is Istvan or something like that, but thank you very much. So I'm Gad Salner, and for the past around 20 years, I've been part of the Israeli tech scene. And for the past 20 days, I've been part of the artificial intelligence generated art. And my last 2 workplaces that inspired me most, which are WeWork and Melio, and there I doubled down on management. I used to be an engineer manager, and then I decided to double down on management. And as Kevin mentioned, I'm also running a side project called Kaduregel Shefel, which translates roughly as low football. It covers the Israel's diversity through the prism of low league football. As you can see, this is pictures from the Israeli desert and from the Sea of Galilee. And this project consists not only of exhibitions, but also video art, pop-up shops, and basically talks around the world. Actually, in Budapest, I didn't have the chance to show it yet. But one of the reasons I'm proud of this project is that at the beginning, we didn't have any clue about producing art exhibitions or even photography or anything. But we did it with step-by-step planning ahead, understanding what we want to be and where we want to be. And when I read a book called Why Decisions Fail, it suddenly made perfect sense to me, because the number you can see on the screen right now is the increased chance of a project to succeed if you have more than 2 alternatives. If you deep dive enough, if you researched enough, and planned enough well to create your own tools to make sure that you can have your project succeed. And because we're talking today about team scaling, and today we're going to talk about several steps that we did in several phases. So I'll visualize it with using my friend Dima, which was one of my engineers. I met him 20 years ago. I wish Dima was here with us today. I mean, he's alive, sorry. I love you, Dima. If you can see the recording later, he's very much alive. I actually met him just before flying in. And basically, we're talking about 3 different phases. Phase 1 is when we were 1 squad. Second phase is when we were a couple of squads, which is the main reason why we managed to leap forward. And the last one, we were a couple of groups. And I'll start with day 1. Day 1 was, let me take you back in time. It was April 2020. And for the entire world, it was the beginning of the pandemic, working from remote, all different sorts of challenges and anxieties. And for me, it was the first day at Melio. And only after a couple of months, it was the first time I actually met the people from the team that I worked with. And if we can take something from these 2 challenging months, is that the most important resource that any organization, group, or club has, it's the human resource. And what we did next is, as a group, as a cohesive group that we all shared our fears and anxieties, and as a group, we sat together because we understood that Melio is about to become something big. And not only it's become something big, but it's on us. So we together as a group of people sat together and tried to understand what is a team. Very like high-level talk, but what makes a group of people like the best team. And we thought of a few steps that we wanted to do. So the first one was we tried to find out what high-level domains consists of a good team. After that, we tried to understand what in each domain, what it consists of. Later, we wanted to understand the gaps between in each and every one of these domains, where we are now and where we want to be. And then in a very holistic approach, we wanted to create action items for each and every one of them, because we wanted to have a very holistic approach of tackling these challenges. We didn't want just to pinpoint like working from remote. We just wanted to have an entire vision because we knew that a year from now, we're going to be something big. So the first domain that we mapped is team. What makes a group of people from different individuals with different motivations, different aspirations, egos, what makes them a good cohesive team that they can work together side by side no matter what. Once we have a good cohesive team, what makes them deliver well? What processes do they need? What challenges they need to overcome? And once we have a good cohesive team which delivers well, how do we make sure that the team continues to grow, continues to deliver well? How do we keep them in a growth mindset that keeps the wheel running? So once we had these high-level domains, we started to break them down into, let's say, parameters. So for example, for a team, we said, okay, how can we make sure that everyone in the team feels engaged, or how everyone in the team communicates well with everyone else in the team? How everyone is making impact. The second phase was delivery. How can we make sure they're all accountable for what they're delivering? How can we make sure it's transparent? How can we make sure that we have the right processes to support this? And once we have a good, solid, cohesive team that delivers well, how can we make sure they have the growth mindset? How can we make sure that they learn from their mistakes? How can we make sure that they empower what they deliver to make the team even more cohesive? So we called it the feed-forward cycle. So every phase and every part and every domain must be something exquisite. And once we understood what are the domains and what they consists of, we started to map the gaps. And we used a very old methodology called SWOT analysis, and for those who don't know, it consists of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And in Melio, we weren't like very big change from most companies at the time. But our strength, we had a good, small, cohesive team that knew each other very well. And we were very techy, we were very high-quality engineers. Yet the weakness is that we were small, so we were also fragile. So if one of us isn't motivated, so the entire team will feel it, and if one of us isn't engaged, the entire team will break down. And the opportunities were Melio's projection of being a unicorn, and there was a lot of work for us as engineers. But the major threats that we had is hypergrowth. Hypergrowth is a big challenge for any organization. And the second one was the pandemic. So both of them share the same challenges. For example, onboarding during remote work, making sure people are staying engaged, people are motivated, people are communicating well, people These are very big challenges on top of any other challenge that any other people has during any other period. So once we understood what we were facing, we started to create action items for each and every one, and to make sure that everyone in the team takes part in this effort. Because if I take you back in like 2 minutes ago, our understanding that the human resource is the most important one, we started to delegate these action items. And these action items I'm going to talk about, I have a different completely talk about working in remote and that period. But I'm going to give you examples on purpose, the very small action items that we did, just to let you feel the notion of how high resolution we got into in each and every one of these domains. For example, for a team, we had like one-on-ones in parks, and we had, for example, for delivery, we in purpose made any feature that we had to work on like couples. We didn't want anyone to work alone on features. We paired senior engineers and less senior engineers to make sure no one is left behind, and make sure that if someone is less motivated because of obvious reasons, the other one will help him and pull him to the next phase. And for growth, we also made like a tech forum to make sure that both engineers, more senior engineers, junior engineers, share their learnings. We signed them up for different resource learnings. And these examples, small as they are just giving you the notion of how far we went just to understand that mapping gaps and creating pinpoint action items and making sure that we have a holistic approach and not just patching up different items is working. Because we didn't want to leave any part behind, as we knew that as we grow, any part could hold us back. And with that, engineers actually, you saw how engineers were more engaged, more motivated, and worked together because they felt they were part of this. We didn't just like from top down say, okay, from now we're going to do this, from now we're going to do that. But together as a group, together we understood that only together, only after we map the gaps together, only after we create action items together, only this is the way to succeed, not only during these challenging times, but going forward. And this is something that also followed with us with the next steps. This like conceptual infrastructure of the feed-forward cycle. And year passed, we became a happy bunch of 15 engineers meeting in the office together, doing stand-up meetings, drinking coffee together at the cooler. Some of us missed it, some of us didn't miss it. But we understood that, again, Melio isn't stopping. Melio is continuing to grow. Melio is still hyper-growing. And we knew that what helped us in the first phase, more challenging, is going to hit us again. It's going to be another challenge, but now a completely different challenge. Because what helped us, the tools that we used and what we searched for when we were just one squad, won't help us when we will become several squads or we will become several groups. So at that exact time, us as a group again met, and we did basically what we learned from the first phase. And there are several approaches of scaling team. So again, if I take you back to the why decisions fail, we thought of, okay, let's try to understand what different types of scaling we have. And if I need to visualize it, these are critical domains that probably most of the companies have, right? Some are more technical, some are more cultural. For example, testing and monitoring and dev experience are very, very techy. But also there are very cultural aspects like onboarding and engagement and knowledge sharing and growth. So these are the domains, the engineering domains that we wanted to tackle. And if we want to map it, if we want to put it on a diagram, so we can use a radar diagram. For example, this is a company, a generic company. So this company's testing is perfect. Their monitoring is covering everything. Wow. But if we look at the onboarding or the engagement, we see a very big gap between where they should be and where they are now. And this is going to bite them months from now when the new person onboards, and it will take half a year until he learns what to do. It will take time from different engineers. If people aren't engaged, they will probably leave after half a year because there are so many opportunities in the market. So these, in general, this is the visualization of the domain, of engineering domains and critical engineering domains that we as a team wanted to be and meet. And then we thought, okay, there are several approaches, okay? There is a stale option, okay, because we're a startup, we're developing fast, we need to meet the KPIs, the board is very demanding, my boss is very demanding, hi Ilan. And so we won't do anything, we'll just deliver, fix bugs, deliver. But what happens next is, as you can see on the radar, is that suddenly things are neglected, right? Suddenly the dev experience is very clunky, testing is like on the side because we don't have time, and we start like even to develop less and less in higher speed. So in this option, people will just leave. So this option was not an option for us. And the other option is top-down approach. Like I mentioned, this is like, I think, the most common approach in any organization, right? The boss knows everything because we're the smartest one in the room. This is how you're going to do testing, 1, 2, 3. This is how you're going to onboard, come on, do this. Problem with this approach is, A, we don't have that much time to deep dive into each and one of these domains, right? Because, again, we want to have a holistic approach. And on the other hand, engineers won't buy in because, okay, the boss said, okay, so fine, I'll do what he says. I don't mind, but they won't be motivated, they won't be accountable for it. And actually, if we saw what worked for us on the first phase when we grew, it isn't part of our culture, what we defined as a team as a culture, right? Because we said as a culture that human resource is the most important resource, we need to empower them, this is the way to grow. So we let that aside, and another approach is domain-specific. Okay, let's say, okay, we don't have time, but testing is very urgent because we always have incidents in production, we always, testing fail, testing takes so much time, so let's deep dive into testing and things will sort out. But this something is, we passed on it because if you can see on the radar, once it will change, we'll get our testing very, very well. But again, the dev experience will be clunky, onboarding, and on the long run, it won't pay off. So we thought, what if there was a way to make sure that we scale in all domains? Not only one domain, not a top-down approach, but we want to think of a way to make sure that a win-win-win situation, right? Because we wanted to get to a place that each and every one of our domains that should support our future scaling will grow. And we thought of an engineering-led way. What's an engineering-led way? We thought of an infrastructure to empower engineers to lead the changes. It doesn't matter if it's cultural or engineer or more techie, but to lead the change together with their managers. And we wanted to do that by creating different task forces that they will lead. Each task force will lead the way. Everyone will find what interests him. Everyone will be paired with a manager. And they will lead the way, and we will be there to support them and make sure that it happens. So this consists of several steps, and these several steps obviously begin with analysis. Because what worked for us when we were one squad it's a completely set of challenges, because what will happen when we're 40 engineers? How will onboarding look when we are 40 engineers? How will the 50th engineer has the same engagement as the first? How can we make sure that testing is perfect and scaling accordingly? So what we did first is, us as managers and tech leads, we mapped all the domains that we wanted to address. So some of them were more techy, some of them were cultural. But at the end, what we did is each domain we gave to different managers. We paired managers and tech leads, and they created one-pagers. Each one-pager consisted of a problem statement, current status, and a very vague goal. And the reason why we kept it vague is because we wanted the engineers that will soon talk about it to make it, to manifest it. So for each domain, for example, for onboarding, for velocity, for testing, each and every one of them had a problem statement, current status, and goals. And what happened next is, and it was probably the most, let's say, scary one part for me, is assignment. One moment. What scared me most about assigning it to the engineers themselves, because we are all engineers, most of us are engineers probably, and we know that engineers are very cynical creatures. I myself am very cynical, and if my manager comes to me with a problem statement and one-pager, when we actually printed these one-pagers as a book and gave it to them on an offsite with it, we did, and we knew that when they will read it, I was very scared. But when we gave it to them on the offsite, suddenly we saw that people were so engaged, and I got phone calls, honestly phone calls from people at night saying, oh, I wanted to lead the onboarding, but I'm very into knowledge sharing and growth. These were the more culture-wise person, and some of us were very into testing, and suddenly you realize that people are into testing. I don't know why, but some people are very into testing. And each and every one of us got a chance to express himself, got something to relate to. And once each and every one assigned a manager and an engineer, and this is the interesting part, we didn't assign on purpose. We assigned engineers and their non-direct managers, because we wanted to have a good mix. We wanted engineers from one team to work with, collaborate with a manager from another team. Because this is a way, if we're going to look down a year from now, we want to make sure that people from different squads are working together. We want to make sure that managers are mentoring different engineers, not from their day-to-day. We want to make sure that engineers are working with different managers. And once we assigned them to different task forces, the next phase was research. And we gave them, usually the rule of thumb for tech debt is 20/80, I think. So we gave them for a month, the 20% of their time, to research. And the research consisted of 3 phases: internal, external, and study. What does it mean? Internal is, okay, go to different squads in the company, how they're doing testing, how is their onboarding, how their dev experience. Let's try to learn from the company, and maybe we can find something that will help us. And the second phase, which is an external research, is we asked engineers and different task forces to go and speak with different companies from different senior level management from different companies, because it's always great to know what other companies are doing on testing, how is their onboarding process, how they're keeping their employees engaged. But also, networking is super important. Networking is a tool that us as engineers use all the time. I mean, one of the reasons basically I'm here is to network with other people, to get to know other people. And it's a super important soft skill that you don't get to, most of the time, workplaces don't just give you chances to network with other companies. But we wanted to make sure that our engineers are contacting and reaching out to different engineers or managers and learning from different companies, and also working on their networking skill, because it's not that easy. And the last part of the research is basically just study. So people ordered books, signed up to courses, and learned. They deep dived, like in any other alternative that we had, they deep dived into any domain and made sure that they have the best perception of how each domain should look like. Once we had that, we asked them to create a plan. So what is a plan? A plan basically consists of a North Star, a timeline, OKR, resources. How many times an engineer in a company has the opportunity to plan 1 year plan of testing, or 1 year of engaged? How do you measure the success of engagement, of knowledge sharing? These are questions that at the time, even I myself couldn't think of. And for each domain, they had to write their North Star. How would testing would look like a year from now? How would dev experience would look like a year from now? Where we want to be? And then they had to create a timeline. What will happen in Q1, in Q2, in Q3, and so we can follow up on these goals. And because we wanted to measure it, we also asked them to create OKRs for each and every one of them. Some of them are more easy. For example, testing, we can see, okay, we want to have this kind of coverage. We wanted to see the number of incidents that is declining. But how can you measure, for example, knowledge sharing and growth? But it's good because now it's a practice that they should have. The engineers should sit down, plan ahead as a senior engineer, and start to understand the high-level plan of a critical engineering domain for the entire company, basically. And then we ask them, okay, you have a North Star, you have a timeline for it, we know how to measure you, but what resources do you need? Resources could be money for different tools, it could be allocation from different engineering, and for example, if we wanted to make sure that our dev experience and we wanted to create good tools for it, so, okay, how much time, how much engineering time do you want in the next sprint, in the next quarter, to make sure that by the end of next quarter, we have a good engineering experience? Once we had that, we also shared it with everyone. And by sharing, I mean everyone studied, right? Everyone for a month took the time, double down on each critical domain, and now it's time basically to share your knowledge. And keep in mind that we have like 8 different domains. Each domain is like sharing its knowledge with 20 other engineers. Think of how much knowledge people gain from other people's research and learning. And this is something that also helped us a lot. And delivery is relatively the easy part, because once we have a very good measuring tools and we know where we want to be, we can measure it, and the delivery is part of any other product aspect of the deliverables. So in general, step by step, it's analysis, assigning, research, plan, share, and deliver. And we saw that every single engineer in our group found his fulfillment, found where his heart is. And this is something that it pays off, because when people have the engagement, when people are motivated, when people find a way they can fulfill themselves, everyone wins. And this is something that after a long time we saw that it works amazingly, because this infrastructure that we created lay down the basis for the next step of our growth. And what happened after about a year, when we became 30 engineers, is that again we started to ask ourselves the same question. Like, it worked perfectly when we were 10, 15, 20, 25 engineers, but what's next? Because we're continuing to grow, things are good but not perfect. So what do we need to do as engineers and as managers? Because Me personally, I didn't have I grew with the company, I didn't have the chance to manage groups before. I was an engineering manager before. So suddenly it was a bit overwhelming for everyone. And we tried to understand, that's a lot of, I promise you we were a more diverse team than just Dimas on the group. But we tried to understand what's our next leap? Where can we even be even better in every one of these? So again, we started to think, what's missing? And what we found is missing is the task forces are working good, but not great, because every one of the task forces are a bit siloed. Every one of the task forces has its own context, and they should probably be more communicative with each other. So no one is fully aligned. The knowledge sharing could be better between them. So what we did is we doubled down on the tech leadership framework that we created, and we made the task forces data-driven. And by data-driven, I mean each domain, each critical domain is affecting and is being affected by different domain, right? If we can take down, for example, testing. Testing affects onboarding, right? Because we want to make sure that any new person that's onboarding is part of the testing culture. We want to make sure that the dev experience is good if you're also writing tests. And also, we wanted to make sure that the dev cycle is part of the testing. So testing should be part of the dev cycle, but, for example, monitoring also affects testing, right? Because we sometimes find some things in monitoring, sometimes the coverage reflects something on testing. So we figured out that we should look at each and every domain as a module that has input and has output. And for example, testing is being affected by the research that the people on the task forces are learning, and the code base itself, and the daily sanity tests that we run, and different incidents, right? This is the input for the testing. But it has an output, because if we learn something in testing, it should be part of onboarding. We should communicate it to the dev cycle team. We should communicate it to the dev experience team. So this is the concept that we thought of, like making it more a module-like infrastructure for each and every one of these domains. But was still challenging for us because it was so noisy. Like, look at this diagram, because we have so many domains, so many inputs and outputs, and if we figure out that without a good tech leadership, we won't be able to scale. So what we did is, by then we had like a tech lead for each and every one of our group, every one of our squads, and we set as tech leads, and we asked ourselves questions that basically I think if I ask anyone in the room, what's a tech lead, I will get like 100 different answers. So we decided to sit together as tech leads and define what is a tech lead, what is the purpose of a tech lead. And what we figured out is that we wanted to make sure that each squad has an ambassador, which is the tech lead, and each task force has a tech lead that is next to it. So each squad could have like an ambassador that reflects all the changes, all the knowledge sharing, all the things that have been implemented during every other task force to make sure everyone is aligned. And this worked for us very well. And if you ask what's next, so for me, probably a warm bath or a sauna because it's freezing. But if I want something to take from this talk is, again, these tools work for us perfectly. You can take some of it, you can take part of it, but if there is something you can take from this talk is the high-level concept of the feed-forward cycle, which is mapping the entire domains of what makes a good team deliver and grow, mapping gaps between where we want to be and where we are now. And the last part, which is the most important part, is people matter. Human resource is the most important resource. we should like double down on making sure they are fulfilled, that they are growing, and we should grow together with them. With that said, I want to thank you everyone for this amazing conference, for this amazing venue. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. We have a few questions. So let's start with the most upvoted one. How did you measure the 8 aspects you have shown?
Cool. So I can put this down. So we had an offsite as engineering managers, and it was a very long day. I can remember it even now. It's a good question. And we actually, each manager had to do a homework of coming to the offsite, because usually offsites are getting like very vague, very like fluffy, but because we wanted to make sure that it works, we asked each manager to write down like 5, I don't remember the number, but pains that he feels right now as an engineering manager. And he could also ask like their engineers or the team, he could ask, but he should come with the most painful, critical engineering domains that he has. And once we all covered up together and grouped them together as managers, we could also understand what's more painful and what's less painful, what's more urgent, what's less urgent. And basically that's it. We also, at some point, I recalled, at some point we also actually gave grade for everyone from 1 to 10. So for each one of these domains, we grouped them. We started to, as a team, to start to scale them and rate them and understand where we want to be and where we are currently.
Thank you. I love the name. Thank you, Benedek Elek, for submitting the next question. Is it healthy to manage such a big team consisting of 30 to 40? Do you have enough time to know each of them?
The problem, my problem, or my, let's say where I can grow as a manager is that I put a lot of time. There are several types of managers. I'm a people manager. Mm-hmm. I put a lot of time, a lot of effort as a manager on people. A lot of time, sometimes too much time. That's the feedback that I get, honestly. And it's good to share it now. It's like a therapy, but sometimes too much time. And we have managers like, as a manager, because I'm very like more process-wise, more people-wise, the managers that I've chosen to work with me are more techie, are more hands-on, so they complement me where I need. Mm-hmm. So basically 40 engineers mean they have 2 group managers. Under them they have like several engineering managers, but for me, from my point of view, I double down on people, on processes, on infrastructure for processes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. How people could allocate so much time for analysis, research, and so on in a rushing startup?
So basically, it's the 20/80 rule of thumb. Mm-hmm. We had 1 month. Each member that joins a task force has 1 month. That from that month, again, we have that 80-20%. How do you say 80-20 rule? That 80% is product work and 20% is more engineering work. Usually the engineering work consists of, okay, let's lay down infrastructure, let's fix infrastructure issues that we want to address. But in particular in this month, the 20%, which is 1 day, mm-hmm. is time spent on this effort. And actually, with time, when we were much bigger and like 30 engineers, some of the engineers decided, when we started the queue, when we planned the queue, we had the engineers had the choice either to have their 20% on regular engineering work or 20% on their task force. And some of the people, when I say 20%, this means 1 day of the week mm-hmm. is working on testing infrastructure, on making sure that the dev experience is great, and monitoring. So this is the way we balanced it.
Okay. How would you scale any of these ideas into enterprise size? 1,000 engineers is very different from 50.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I hope I have the chance if someone wants someone wants to talk to me, and maybe we can figure it out together. But That's a good question. That's actually a very good question. I think it will be probably, it will basically, I think, would be probably something like understanding together, mapping the gaps together, a more high level, but I didn't have the chance to do it, so I can't tell.
I don't know if you have been around yesterday, there was a team about gas, and today I think we have a team around the government. So the next question is, how far can you scale? Is it possible to run a country like this?
Wow. I want to meet the person that asks that. I have several questions for him. That's a very, very, very interesting question. Wow, that's a very interesting question. I don't know. I did got a lot of likes, I see, like 11 likes, more than other questions. I know, but if I learn something from scaling with companies, and I understand this is something like an insight I got from the time I worked in and worked closely with companies that grew. I understand that any organization, doesn't matter, like I was an engineer and I said, oh my God, how is it like to be a manager? When I became a manager, I understood, okay, that's a manager, so how it's become like a manager above me. And when you grow as a manager, you see that things doesn't change. It's basically at the end, it's people, it's like person to person. So I guess countries unfortunately run like this, politics and stuff, but that's a good question. Someone liked it even, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we spoke about the second one, so I think it's the third one now. How did you balance between building the foundation, 8 domains, and delivering impact to the customers, how others thought about it?
There is always a tension that actually there's a good, when me and my colleague, I was an engineering group lead and I had a product director, and we both left the company a couple of months ago. And when we met, I think 2-3 weeks from before, we talked about there is always some kind of tension between managers and product managers. And we thought that we probably, in general, but I'll get to the point in a second, but product managers and engineering managers should work better, to collaborate better together, because sometimes product managers doesn't know what engineers are working on from their spare time, because, okay, they need to deliver, but engineers know that they need to do 1, 2, 3, because we couldn't deliver high quality product if it wasn't tested, if it wasn't monitored, if we wouldn't be able to onboard new engineers. And this is something that we could communicate well and better to product managers. And again, I'm being super honest, this is something that we could have done better, personally. And, but at the end, once we decided on the 20/80 rule of thumb and what we do with our 20% is what we do with our 20%, boundaries is very important for organizations in general, but specifically in tech as well.
Thank you. Maybe a good segue is the next one. As a people manager, how far have you distanced yourself from the technical side?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. I think I distance myself with time. It depends on times, because it had its own periods. Some periods when we understood, when we had pauses to understand where we want to be and plan ahead. It could have been 1-2 months of double down only on this and delegate more technical stuff to the engineering managers that complemented me. But I think me personally, I'm more of my flavor is more like procedures and people and hiring people. And I think I distanced myself enough to make sure that things are under control. But it's tricky. You could find yourself very quickly forgetting about the technical aspects and just delegating it too much. And you should probably keep in mind that it's tricky. You need to be on point, check pulse, and very good question.
And one last question. If you had to choose one obstacle that caused the biggest challenge while scaling, what would it be?
Well, on the first phase, it was probably remote work, which was, at the time, I didn't even imagine How would it look like? How do you create culture when you're in remote work? How do you make sure everyone is like, because I'm a people person, because of my background and my side projects, I know how like people and culture is super important. And for me, suddenly, this is something that I was like left out and I couldn't think what to do. But from this, it came a great plan of understanding, okay, this is the challenges that we're facing. Let's double down on that. And this is for the first phase. For the second phase, I think that I mentioned it on the talk itself, but I was really, 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 really scared from what engineers themselves will act when we see that when we gave them these one-pagers, because this was a moment that it could make or break. Because if engineers would look at it and say, started to talk between themselves and say, what does he want? It's time consuming, I don't want to be part of it. So it wasn't only just a challenge, but it was like an anxiety or like a fear. But that's a good question.
Thank you. And with that, I also wanted to thank you for coming here and being here with us today.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Thank you.